Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, whatever platform you're listening to us on, wherever in the world you're listening to us from. Thank you guys so much for listening to this, for sharing it with others. Really appreciate the support and really appreciate you guys taking some time out to listen to this one. Today's episode is one that I really am looking forward to having a discussion about, because film is something that all of us as coaches, all of us in our program use in various ways, whether even at the very youngest youth levels, all the way from high school, AAU, collegiate level. Film is just something that's really important. You know, as the old adage goes, you know, film doesn't lie, and is a great teaching tool, not only for us as coaches, but also as a teaching tool for our players as well. And that's primarily going to be our focus today, on using film as a teaching tool and how to kind of dissect, look at film and get the most out of it so that your players can understand it and interpret it and make the growth and make the gain that they need to in order to improve on the court. So I think this one applies to everybody. So my guest today to help discuss this topic is the video coordinator for Temple University women's basketball. I'm very happy to be joined. I call everybody coach. I don't know if that's the title you go by, but I'm going to call you coach anyway. Coach Joey Raniero. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself, man?
I'm doing quite well. As we're recording this in the winter, I'm just saying I'm glad I live in Phoenix and not near Temple University. I'll say that right now.
Yeah, these winters can be brutal. It's actually probably around 25, 30 degrees outside, but it's been warm this winter, which we've been lucky to have out here.
Yeah. As somebody who grew up in the Chicago area, I don't miss that at all. So
we actually were just in Chicago a few days ago, and it was yeah, I'm not very jealous of that either.
Don't blame you. Well, let's go ahead and get into introduction for you and your basketball journey. I know that Temple University is something that's been very, very important to your basketball journey. So let's talk about where the game's taken you, how you got to Temple, and what kept you at Temple in your current position that you're in.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with where I played my high school basketball, which is kind of where I got into this journey of, you know, coaching and getting into the video and coaching space. So I grew up in a small town called Milford, Pennsylvania. If anybody's heard of the Poconos, it's about probably like 40 minutes north, closer towards New York, New Jersey. So I played high school basketball for Coach Chris Holzer, who's actually, you know, he's been a very big influence on my life and a lot of other players' lives. We played at Delaware Valley High School. He's the one who pretty much introduced me to, you know, how to be a coach and a lot of the player development aspects of coaching. So I'm forever grateful for him. So I played my 4 years there in high school, and my senior year, I had to make a decision whether if I wanted to either play, you know, college basketball at the Division III level or attend Temple. And I kind of went for it, and I made the decision really early in my senior year. I wanted to just go to Temple, get my education, and try to seek out as many opportunities as I could to get into coaching basketball. So that's what I did. So I graduated high school 2014, and from 2014 to 2018, I was an undergraduate student at Temple University. So while I was an undergraduate, I wanted to kind of continue to play. So I decided to try out to be a walk-on for the men's team. That didn't work out the way that I wanted it to, but I was introduced to another good mentor, good friend of mine, James Spinelli, who's actually the video coordinator at Notre Dame right now for their women's basketball program. And I became a male practice player for the women's team, which is where I pretty much introduced myself to the staff that I work for now, and just the program in general. So over my 4 years, I was I was relentless. I kind of went to pretty much as many practices as I could. Even if I wasn't used in those practices, I was just excited to be there in a college basketball environment where I could see, the different aspects of, what goes into college basketball.
Sure.
At the Division I level. So I developed a really good relationship with the staff. Like I said, who basically it kind of got my foot in the door and got me to where I'm at right now in this job. So Coach Tanya Cardoza, Coach Wade Vini, Coach Wilnett Crockett, they've all been here throughout me being a student and even now as a part of the coaching staff who oversee me. So when I graduated, James, actually, that was his first year. That summer, I was supposed to be a GA. The position opened up because he left to go to Notre Dame. And, I pretty much just kind of stepped right in that summer and took over as the video coordinator. So I've been here ever since. And I love being at Temple. I've been here it feels like this is like a quarter of my life being here in Philadelphia. And I love every minute of it. And I'm so grateful that I've had this opportunity to be a part of this staff.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And like you said, sometimes the journey that you thought you might go on when you first got to Temple didn't exactly go the way that you necessarily thought it was going to, but here you are in a position that you really like and you're really happy in. So kind of like making the most out of the situation you find yourself in.
Yep. Just kind of always, being open to whatever opportunities come your way. And, there's never, you may have a plan in mind or a vision in mind for where you think you can end up or will end up. But, this is where it's taking me. And like I said, I'm forever grateful for the opportunity that I have.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And, there's a lot of people who, especially those who played at the collegiate level, but also people who didn't, who look to get involved in the college game in some form or fashion. And a lot of people talk about that as, being a goal of theirs and wanting to be involved in, college athletics or, specifically the basketball program for the sake of this show. What advice would you give to somebody who might be looking to get involved in basketball at the collegiate level, just from, your experience and the things that you've seen? Is there any particular way that you think is kind of like the best way to go about it or an effective way to go about it?
I think the simplest way to put it is to, just to always stay seeking opportunity. Because like you said, some of us aren't, we don't have that path where we were players and we can kind of just transition right into coaching and have an easy, path into doing that. So, I mean, I would tell anybody who wants to get involved at the collegiate level, just seek as many opportunities as you can, be a manager, be like myself, be a practice player, volunteer your time and kind of really just build relationships with the people who matter in the basketball world at whatever school you're at. And then I'd also say, like, don't ever think you're too good enough to be doing a job when you're just trying to get your foot in the door. Just be ready to do anything. So whether it's cleaning the floor or, handing out water bottles or staying late to rebound for a player, whatever the case is, just, say yes as many times as you can, just so you're around the game and people can learn to trust you. And then another big thing I'd say, if it's possible, learn skills such as like video editing, how to navigate different softwares like I'd say Huddle is readily accessible online. Do those things, but even just video editing in terms of, the Adobe suite, if you have Premiere Pro or After Effects, or even just, if you have a Mac, iMovie, those sort of things aren't taken for granted anymore, especially in the position where I'm at. A lot of video coordinators aren't asked just to do basketball things. They're asked to, create for recruiting and other aspects of the program. So as much skill as you can acquire, I would say do it, and I'd say the last thing is to just watch as much basketball as you can. Just continue to watch basketball, learn the game. You kind of develop a philosophy for yourself but always be open to adding different things. I was obsessive about it. I would watch games, but I would also, I'd watch post-game press conferences with coaches and players. I'd read articles, kind of like how I would tell young kids to study players. Like if there's a game on and say Chris Paul is playing tonight and I want, my point guard to watch somebody, I would say just watch Chris Paul. Don't watch anybody else. Just pick him out. I would kind of say just, pick out a coach and study them, watch how they go about it. Or even if it's just, video coordinators, you can go online now and look up, biographies online for different video coordinators and director of basketball operations people. You can follow their journeys and see how they got to where they are. I think learning the many different processes to get to for how these people got to where they got to, I think that's also important when you're just trying to get your foot in the door, to kind of see these different, there's not one path that everybody has to take. Your path is your individual path, and always be proud of that.
Yeah, I like the general advice of kind of like being open for anything. If you're all about it and this is something that you really want to do, you got to be ready to kind of take on any role or any position that kind of gets offered to you. And like you said, just do the best you can at it, and acquire as many skills as possible. And then even that first part you said about relationships, I think whatever line of work you're getting in, if you form positive, good relationships with people, a lot of doors tend to open up for you for sure.
Yeah, I mean, trust is that big thing.
Absolutely.
If a coach, if you can get a coaching staff to trust you, and you're just a student or a manager, you're doing something right, and you want to continue to do whatever it is you're doing. Because if that's essentially how I got into my position, was I built up a lot of trust between me and the coaching staff, and they trusted me so much to offer me the opportunity to take on this job. So. Yeah, anytime you can get your face in front of somebody and you can build that mutual trust relationship with them, that's definitely big.
Awesome. To start out this topic here, I think it's probably important for listeners to kind of understand, in as best as you can describe it, what is your role, as a video coordinator. I think that maybe we understand what the words video coordinator sort of mean, but specifically for you and in your position, what are some of the facets that entails and kind of as part of your job description?
So I mean, my role is basically to manage all film related to our practices, our games, and our scout film. I'm pretty much overseeing all of that, anything that has to come with that software, maintaining our scout film library, things of that nature. That's all my job. Also, making sure recording and breaking down practices as it may be. I also record a coach's copy of the game because, at the college level, we're lucky enough to have, TV copies and things of that nature. So I'll upload those types of copies to a program we use called Synergy, and we keep our film database on there as do pretty much every Division I college program. But like I said, I'll record a coach's copy with our own camera, just for our head coach to kind of not worry about all the cutaways and those things that happen with the TV copy. But as well as just with, aside from the film stuff, I help with a lot of administrational things as well. I just recently been assisting with scheduling. That's been something in the off season that gets really hectic. And then essentially in our program, anything that's technology related, I'm the guy that's got to solve it. And I wasn't a tech major or anything like that. It just, that's why I said, whenever you can, learn as much information as you can. And you
had to become a tech person.
Yeah, I had to become a tech person essentially to figure different things out with, computers, cameras, phones, whatever the case may be. I always have to, be on my top of the I mean,
you just had to figure it out, sort of thing.
I just really had to figure a lot of things out, and I didn't when I took the job, I really didn't think that was what it was a part of it, but it becomes that. And you know, it comes at you fast. So you got to learn a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ways to deal with it, and you know who to call and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But another big part of that is recently this year and last year I've been thrown into. So normally support staff members, which is what I would fall under, not coaching staff. I fall under that support staff role. We're not allowed to be on court, and we're not allowed to assist with on court duties. But the NCAA has passed waivers this year and last year that allow us to kind of get on the court and be available. So it's almost like I've gone back to, you know, those practice player days where I'm on the court assisting and helping out, you know, whenever it's possible, whenever it's allowed. So that's another big thing.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I didn't realize that kind of responsibility had changed a little bit recently, but probably opens up some different like avenues or some different ways that you kind of look at things, kind of being able to do some different things that you weren't able to before.
Yeah, for sure. It's, you know, my first couple of years, you know, prior to COVID happening, it was, you know, I was never on the floor at all. And I couldn't, just because I wasn't allowed due to, you know, NCAA rules and regulations. So, um, you know, it was kind of a big deal when they passed that waiver last year. I was like, oh wow, I can actually get on the court, you know, do those sort of things that I haven't been able to do for the last few years. So,
Yeah.
um,
No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool that you're now able to do that. So,
yeah.
let's kind of start with, I think one of the things that, coaches are, always trying to get the most out of when they do film sessions or go over things that they see in film or their players look at film is to make sure that, you know, their players see the things that kind of like the coaches see, or that they notice things on film that maybe they didn't even realize that were happening during the course of the game, and things of that nature. So I want to talk about, in your experience, about some things that you think that in general speaking that players either don't notice or they really learn, like, oh, this is actually what's going on when they see it on film. What are some things that you think players really take notice, or maybe didn't realize until they see it there on film?
I think the big one that I always that film always reveals is spacing. You know, players when they're on the court, generally they always think they're in the right spots on the floor until you show them the film. And even if it's just like a couple steps or a couple feet, you know, that makes the world of the difference the higher level of basketball you play at. But if, you know, for both offense and defense, I think just floor awareness and where players are on the floor is something that they always notice when film comes on. But timing as well, you know, are they where they need to be when they need to be? Basketball is like, it's a game of quick decisions and in a lot of instinct. So film reveals a lot of that, and it reveals it really quick.
Mhm.
So I say another big one is effort. Like, I mean, you said it in the beginning, you know, film never lies.
Yep.
Effort is always a big one that you can see on film. Like an example would be, you know, you show clips in a row without speaking of a player, and then you ask them right away what they see. The first thing they're going to see is, oh, I wasn't running hard, or I wasn't playing hard enough, or I wasn't giving the right
Huh.
amount of effort. And I think that's something that they always will notice. But you know, at every level, whether it's college or high school, middle school, NBA, WNBA, you know, effort can get you a lot of playing time.
Yeah.
And you know, coaches do not like to coach effort. You know, that's one thing that
I know,
they
I
they
don't.
struggle yeah, they struggle with that a lot. And you know, it's, to be honest, it's, you know, it's hard to coach effort, because a lot of the times it's, you know, either you want to play or you don't want to play. And, you know, but we have the ability to show it on the film, which I think is very important. We can show what it looks like. We can show what we want it to look like. And then there's just, you know, there's just a certain pace to the game and how it should look, depending on your philosophy, um, and you know, your age group, and where you're teaching it. No matter your athletic ability, you know, you don't have to be the most skilled guy or girl on the floor. Um, to be exerting maximum effort. But I think it's important that they show that the kids, you show the kids what effort looks like, and film will always reveal that.
Since you've been in this role for a while, and you've kind of seen probably some trends and some things kind of pop up again and again, when you talk about the effort not being there, or maybe not being where it should be, or at the level that it should be, are there specific instances, or is it sort of the idea of just sort of like taking plays off, or just not hustling as hard? What does that sort of like look like on film when you talk about like, oh, that effort, or the players like, oh yeah, my effort wasn't as where it needed to be?
Yeah, I think like even for just take example of offensive rebound. Depending on your philosophy, it's going to change. Sometimes you want people to crash, but you can see if somebody's standing out of the 3-point line, and you've been harping on it for the last month and a half to tell people to crash. If they're standing outside or kind of just walking around, it's very easy right there to show a distinction of effort. That's always an example that pops up. And then one thing that we see, especially in post game film, is transition offense and transition defense is a big thing that we will show in our clips. But you can see when opposing teams, bigs, especially bigs, will run the floor and get easy layups. And sometimes maybe our players may not, they just may be jogging back. There's that certain distinction. That level is always revealed when you go over film. So yeah, that's always something big that's always on our mind, and something that we constantly need to show them, to remind them, you always got to be playing at this type of level, and you got to be exerting this type of effort.
Yeah, and it's interesting to kind of think about that too, for players to be able to identify that, though, I think, and be able to kind of recognize that. I think that's really important that they're able to recognize that. And then I'm also kind of thinking, the back of my head is, so long as they end up fixing it so it doesn't have to happen in the next film session, we're like, wait a minute, didn't we just talk about this before, and here it is happening again?
Yeah, and usually, if you highlight it several times in a film session, kids are smart enough to be like, okay, I can't be doing this anymore. I don't want to be exposed on film anymore. I'm tired of my name popping up in the film session where I'm doing something wrong. I want to do something right, and then hopefully you expect that to translate. And most times it does translate, and then sometimes when it doesn't, kids will find out fast, why they may not be playing as much, or why certain things are happening in the game, and it just clicks sometimes. So.
Yeah. You brought up something that I know that I've always sort of had to contend with, and I think a lot of coaches in a lot of different programs kind of have to balance this when it comes to film sessions. And you kind of brought it up just now, so that this kind of popped in my head. I think one of the balances that we as coaches always have to strike is using film sessions as like a teachable tool, versus using film sessions almost as like a punishment to expose players, and film sessions can get pretty nasty pretty quick, as depending on the game and situation, or what it is you're exactly looking at on film. So just in your experience, what's that balance kind of been like, where like film is a valuable, it's a teaching tool, and there's learning that's taking place from it, but it's also not such a negative experience where it's players just feel like they're just getting completely called out, and they're not, feeling like they're doing nothing right on the court?
Yeah. Generally, for depending on how, especially for post game film, I'll dive into it this way. Post game film is, you can break it down into two ways. You can show every mistake that went wrong and why you lost a game or won a game, or you can also show, based on how you want your players and how you teach your players to play, you could show it that way. I think, especially at the younger levels, it's more important not to make your film sessions where it's just, constantly harping on, the kids. And, I think it's more important to show them what they did right and how they did it correctly, than it is to kind of say, oh, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. But I guess at our level, it's a little different sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
Because sometimes that that one area of the game may have cost you the game, like offensive rebounding. So you may have given up, 10 or 11 offensive rebounds and you lost by 6 or 7 points. That's a big difference in the game. And you might just want to show that those clips at the end of the game. But sometimes I think it's important, to really find, like I said, those clips where your players are doing things correctly, so they know that, um, film isn't just about, okay, let's go into this room, shut the lights off, and see what I did wrong. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
I think you got to find that balance for sure.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's going to look a little bit different at the collegiate level, at the high school level, I'm thinking about younger levels, and in my experience at high school level, that if that's
Yeah.
what film sessions become, I think you're going to get a lot of players at the younger levels just completely shutting down there. They'll probably won't even listen
Yeah.
to you because they know, like, oh well, here it goes again. I'm just going to get punished.
Yeah.
Like, they're just tune out. But it's a little bit different, like you mentioned, at the at your level, and there might be, when games are really close, there might just be certain things that need to be cleaned up, especially, if the way, and then you can talk about this, the way your schedule is, games get busy, things get busy. There might be a quick
Yeah.
turnaround. You might just have to focus on maybe a few things in particular because you might need to get back out there on the road or on your next game really soon, and so you can't just you got to focus maybe on zero in on specific things to clean up
Yeah.
right away.
And like you mentioned before, at least at our level, sometimes that quick turnaround, you really don't want to spend a lot of time going over film of what you did wrong, because you got to prepare for your next opponent. So, it's really, if you can keep your sessions to 10 to 15 minutes at the max, and you can get out there and start preparing for your next game, because, as much as you want to change the outcome, or, you want to talk about the outcome of your last game, I think it's important to start preparing, and kind of, you give yourself a time limit for that last game, and then you got to move on, at our level. But I mean, even at the high school level, I remember, um, whenever we did watch film, because I know we didn't get to watch it a lot, we knew we were going in there to kind of see, um, exactly what other teams may be running, but also what we need to be doing. And I think that's what kind of sparked it. Was, my high school coach was good with that. He would always kind of show us what we needed to look like, essentially running our offense, our defense, whatever the case may be, the different things that we need to be doing to win games, or to compete a lot harder, a lot better in our game.
And just kind of like going along with that, I think that, at all levels, especially, that's helpful, where if you're looking at, like you said, 10-15 minutes of film, here are some of the things that we saw, and here are some of the things that, like, we either improve on or clean up on, and if we can do these, that, we can translate this or work this into what we need to do, in our next game or our next stretch of games, and make it so it's at least something you can like build off of, versus like, I'm going to
Yeah.
punish you for this, and then now we're just going to focus on this next thing, and it could be kind of disjointed if it doesn't sort of transition into like, all right, this is what happened, but now let's like work on this so that we can do better next time, sort of thing.
Yeah, and at those younger levels, if you can go into a film session and connect, because I mean, we've all been in a situation where you're on the floor, and somebody does something right, and if you're lucky enough to be able to tape your practices, I would say do it at the high school level.
Mm.
You want to show kids as many times that they've done something correctly, so it connects, and they see it on the film. It's a different view of seeing it, but it also is kind of like a review session. So think of it like you're teaching kids. Like, teachers will go in and they'll have study sessions, or different things like of that nature. That's essentially what it is. If a kid can see what he did right again, I think that's when it really clicks, and it kind of becomes a habit on the court. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I remember I had a film session once where I was highlighting something that a player did well, and she had like no idea like how she did it or why she did it. And I was like, oh, I probably should emphasize something you do well so that you know to keep doing that if you don't really know why you did it or how you did it to begin with. So even those things
Right.
sometimes that players are doing well, sometimes they might not even know why they're doing it well. So we got to emphasize those too and make sure they're learning to keep doing those things.
Yeah, film really shows, it can kind of connect that why, which you
Hmm.
were just talking about. And I think that's a big piece of why film is important and why you should show it. Like I'll encourage anybody at the high school level to, whether you have a camera or an iPad or whatever the case may be, film as much as you can, and try to connect it with your players because, those are the important things that really keep your players energetic and excited to play the game when they kind of get that reinforcement of what they're doing.
And yeah, absolutely. You have like the reinforcement aspect, and keep the things highlighting all the things that they do well. And I also know, kind of on the reverse end is I know coaches don't like having those conversations about telling their players that, to do something or fix something, and then the player says, "Oh, but I was doing that," or I did do
Yeah,
this correctly. It's like, all right, well, we're gonna film this, and we'll see
yeah,
really quickly, and that can eliminate a lot of conversations right away if it's filmed, and like, all right, we can just look at film and find out, sort of deal.
yep, yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, um, we talked a little bit about things related to effort and things of that nature. Something else that I was kind of curious about, for the players that you work with, and again, it's a little bit different at the level that you're at. Are there any things in particular that players are looking for in film, or players specifically are trying to learn from or trying to grow from in film? I think one of the things that I know a lot of coaches I've talked to, and myself as well, is try to work on their players getting invested in film, and really looking for you know their own personal growth, and trying to figure out how to improve themselves. So I'm curious, in your experience, what are your players, or what does the team kind of look for, either on a team level or an individual level, to kind of get out of film themselves?
Um, we do it at our level. Our coaches, um, they kind of have what we call position kids, and they'll
Hmm.
come in one and have that one-on-one session with our coaches. Mostly after every game, they'll come in and kind of just watch film for just specifically on how they played in their area
Hmm.
of the game. And I think that's also important to you want to have those team film sessions, and trust me, those are very big. But in terms of developing each individual player, you got to have that one-on-one time.
Yeah.
Um, and it is very important. But I guess from a team aspect, the things that you kind of want to display and show, especially for things that will translate at the team level, you want to show togetherness. Communication is a big one on film. Um, and then what you value, each program and each staff is going to have different values and different pillars in their program. So you want to kind of build that into your film sessions. Um, if you know full court defense is what you and your program go for, you want to kind of gonna show those clips more so than the half court defense. But
Hmm.
it's gonna your film is gonna range basically on what you teach. Um, I think Porter Moser, I think he coaches he's the head coach at Oklahoma now. He was coach at Loyola Chicago. He calls
Yep.
them get better clips.
Yeah.
And he always used to kind of harp on you achieve what you emphasize. So as a staff, if you can always go into a film session with that in mind, I think that's very, very helpful. But in terms of those one-on-one sessions where it's a little bit more intimate and coaches can kind of have that conversation back and forth, which you normally really don't get in team film sessions. Anytime a player can leave that film session more confident in their abilities or where they can take their team's abilities, I think that's when the growth will occur for your team. Um, because really, essentially, the game is about confidence. Can
Yeah.
you inspire confidence in your players? And this is not at our level, at the high school level. it's the same thing, but anytime, I would say, if you can find statistics, especially that back up what you're showing on the film, and you can, for our players, it'd be like, if we took one of our guards and we went into a film session and they had 5 turnovers and we showed all those turnovers, but we also showed all their assists and how important it is for them to be aggressive and, pick their spots. I think that's important that they see, okay, I need to take better care of the ball. Or, in this situation, I'm not going to be throwing the ball here because, we have something going on the backside of our offense that we need to kind of be patient and develop. It's those sort of those aha moments where the players can see it and really kind of grow from it. That's when you'll see them kind of begin to improve on the court. And, film is very, it's going to show it. It's always going to show it. So.
And I think the important part about the conversation in the example that you just mentioned about kind of that balance is, you're gonna, show, the turnovers and the way that, those transpired and what can be fixed on that, but also obviously the things that they did well. And I'm thinking, for coaches at the high school level or younger level, it's especially, you don't want to, have your point guard think that, they're a terrible ball handler, a terrible passer, and should never be doing anything because you're just harping on like the 5 turnovers that they have. Like they're still probably, at least for their level, probably a solid ball handler. They're a solid passer, but maybe they just made some like mental errors or just made the wrong decision. And those things are more of like tweaks rather than, you could go about it the opposite where it's like, here's all the things you're screwing up. You don't know how to handle the ball, this, that, or the other. And then all of a sudden things like are going in a completely different direction when that player leaves the room.
Right. I mean, like I mentioned it before,
confidence.
Yeah, confidence it's a big, it is a big thing. And normally when, I've seen it in instances where we have really talented players, but they're just going through a patch where the confidence in their ability is just not there. And you can see the kind of difference in talent level that it takes. The higher at our level, the Division I level, you're going to be running into, you may play teams that you scout on film and you see on film, and you may think you have an advantage to win a game, but if they come out and they're more confident and they execute and do different things, you could very well lose that game just because of that aspect. So it's very important. I think as coaches, we have that duty to really inspire the confidence in our players and make sure that they go out and even through mistakes, they remain confident. And film is a very, it's one tool that you can use. I always think of it an example as, sometimes you're not going to play that complete game. So if you can go in a one-on-one film session and show, the ups and downs of that game and get that message across to a player, I think they'll understand, okay, I'm going to make mistakes, but, I got to continue to, do these things that coach has taught me and can believe in my abilities and, we'll get this thing right. And I think that is generally more important than any other thing that you can get out of a film session.
And with what you just said, being at a D1 school, one of the unique, positions that you may face, going over film or doing film sessions is I'm sure you can speak to this, that you have players who come into your program who are probably, dominant at their high school level and maybe didn't face a lot of adversity or a lot of struggle. And then they get up to the collegiate level and they might be experiencing things that, challenges or difficulties that they never had to experience before. And it's like a whole new level, I'm sure, of adversity for some of them that, it makes those film sessions maybe a lot different than the ones they maybe were having in high school.
Yeah. That's a big, and we talk about that all the time. I'm actually kind of glad that you brought it up. A lot of the times the girls that we recruit, and this is at a lot of schools, you're recruiting the best players from their high school or from their prep school or, whatever the case may be, their AAU teams. So a lot of the times they're not used to being in an environment where there may be, half the team or even more players that are, they may see them as, more talented or better. So, that for the first time, especially with our freshmen that come in, this is the first time in an environment where everybody is talented and you kind of have to, make them take that step back and realize, okay, so what are the things, talent is not going to separate you. What are the the intangibles that can set you apart, and confidence is a big one, because if you can step on the court and be more confident in the team that you're playing, and trust what you're doing, that's going to get you a far way. Even if you're not as talented, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, that confidence it's huge, and especially at our level, it makes a world of difference if you can inspire your kids and get them to play with ultra confidence.
Yeah, and then thinking about just the overall like concept of using film as a teaching tool, I think for coaches even at all levels, and even sounds like at your level too, you almost have to think sometimes about what is the goal of this particular, like an individual film session, like you talked about, like if your players and like kind of where it is that they're at, like is this film session one where almost like strictly business type thing, and we're going through all the X's and O's, and you're ready to go, or is it one of those things where it's like, hey, your confidence may be a little lacking, we got to rework this, or have a different little conversation in this film session, maybe about not as heavy on certain things, but make sure that you're being more positive and keeping your confidence level up. I think sounds like it's really important to kind of know, at all levels, kind of know your players, kind of know where your team's at, and make sure that like you have a sense of that, as opposed to maybe going into every single film session like the exact same way.
Yeah, it's at every level it's important to learn your players, because then you can kind of navigate that when and why aspect of film. If it's a team wide thing where confidence, then you kind of want to get everybody in the room, and you want everybody to get the message. But if you can tell if a player's had a stretch where a couple of games they're not playing up to the standards that they've shown you, or that you kind of want to hold them up to, you can kind of take them aside and have a little 5-10 minute film session where you can just kind of almost like a pep talk, and it's a little cliche, but I mean, kids do need that. And you just got to be cognizant of it as a coach. Like I said, that when and why is always important, but the more you learn your players and learn the people around you, I think you can kind of navigate that space, and it makes it a little bit easier to kind of go through with all of that.
Yeah, it just kind of goes back to even like the advice that you gave in one of the first questions about just building those relationships, whether it's looking for a job, or whether it's trying to coach an effective program. Get to know your players, get to know what they need, that sort of thing, and it'll just save you a lot of time in the long run, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, as coaches, we're people. We're people's people. I guess that's the way to say it. When you're dealing with people, the best way to get the most out of them, especially kids, is to learn them and kind of develop that trust. It's the easiest way to really learn from somebody. And it may not even be basketball stuff, just have conversations with them, and kind of build that area of it. And players will, they'll do whatever it takes to, if you can have that trust level at us, get that to a certain level, they'll do whatever it takes on the floor to win games for you.
Pivoting a little bit in the idea of film in general, we talk about film for upcoming games, whether it's in preparation for upcoming teams and scouting and things of that nature. One of the things I've always been kind of curious about, especially when there's such quick turnaround sometimes at the collegiate level, is how film, like scout film, can be used in a way that you're emphasizing the most important parts, where you're taking in all this film and then distilling it down to the most important things that the team or the players need to know. What is kind of that process like? Because I know that it can get pretty intensive, with a lot of film and a lot of things that you look at, but then to try and boil that down to what's most important, what is that process like, and how do you kind of emphasize the things of most important for your team?
So I would say at our level, this would be my personal opinion. I think if you can kind of hash out the team identity of, especially for scout film, if you can communicate that to your players, team identity is the big one. And then obviously personnel, of the team that you're about to be playing. If you can kind of do something creative where you can get those two things across, and you can make it simple. A lot of the times that will probably work, especially in this age where kids digest so much content on social media and everything. They kind of just want that. They learn quicker. So you can keep I don't know if you give out scouting reports, but even if you're just kind of running through and you want your players to know, okay, this is the team we're going to be playing against. This is their personnel. Keep it simple as possible. I would kind of, if you're doing personnel, I would use a couple bullet points. I kind of heard something a few months ago that makes a lot of sense. If you can use player comparisons especially for personnel, even if it's like they may not be as talented as an NBA player, but you can kind of get that in as something that you put on a personnel sheet. I think kids kind of will they'll assimilate to that and they'll recognize, oh, okay, so he's really a point guard, or you put like a high volume score from the NBA, and this player is like XYZ. They can kind of understand, okay, this is the type of player I'm going to be guarding, and so on and so forth. But like I said, as terms for scouting reports, keep it as simple as possible. One page if you can. We like to do it where we kind of have our offensive, like we'll put their identity on the front of the sheet, offensive keys, defensive keys, and then we have our keys to win the game. We kind of keep it simple as that, and then we'll run through however many personnel we want, because some teams only play 7 guys. Sometimes they'll play 8 girls. Sometimes they play 10 or 11. So you kind of just got to be cognizant of that when you're watching film and looking at box scores and getting that message across.
And I think that's a real good indicator where I know you're speaking for your program, but if that's what your team needs at the level that you're at in terms of scouting and information that your players need, I have always been the firm believer too that kind of less is more, especially me being at the high school level where players don't have time for this stuff, and I found, at least at my level too, is that the more I tell my team about things about the other team, the more they're thinking about them and the less they're thinking about what they personally need to get done or need to do. And sometimes I feel like my team might perform worse the more I tell them about the other team, because then their thoughts are going elsewhere and they're not able to take that information and kind of like refocus on it. They sort of just dwell on like what the other team is about and what they're doing. And I don't know, it's kind of a tricky balance that maybe I haven't quite figured out perfectly yet.
Yeah, something that I've kind of seen that, and it goes along with your point, is sometimes we play our best games when the scouting report, a lot of what the messages that we kind of give out are, what can we do to beat this team, instead of what do we need to do to stop this team. Because when you kind of take it from those two angles, when you start talking about what we need to do to stop it, and that's the only thing you're communicating, these kids are, some of them can get in their head and say, oh, I don't remember what happens during this play, or I don't remember what this number does when they get on the court. So then they kind of start thinking too much instead of, understanding what it is that you want to do as a team to go out there and win a game. And that's a good point that you make. A lot of the times in scout, sometimes it really, all it takes is, what do we need to do to beat this team? And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
More so than the other way around.
It's more, I feel like more empowering to your team too, if they can like, here's what like you can do, or like what we need to do, and kind of it's less of like you said, kind of like what we have to do against the other team versus like, here's what we're going to do, and like here's what we have in control of that we're going to be able to be successful with. I think is probably more, especially at the high school level and younger, probably a lot more motivating to your players, and a lot more easy for them to kind of understand and do something with, versus trying to worry about stopping the other team. because that almost puts it on like a negative thing where it's like, oh, we got to stop them because, you know, like they're, you know, we got to do everything in our power to keep them from, you know, doing well rather than focus on like us doing well as a team. It's kind of an interesting little balance in the way that you word that conversation.
Yeah, the communication and the way that you communicate is very big when it comes to scout film. So, and I understand, you know, people have different ways of doing things. Sometimes they, you know, I'm never going to mess with if the program has won a lot of games and they do it a certain way and that's how they do it. I would never tell somebody to change it because, you know, it works. Different ways work for different staffs and different programs. So, but I mean, just from what I've seen and my philosophy that I guess I've developed is, you know, it's more important to kind of communicate what your team can do to win a game rather than flipping the switch and saying, this is what they're going to do to us. This is how we need to do things to stop them, and you know, that sort of message.
As we said to wind down, there's another question that kind of popped in my head here. Considering how long you've kind of been in that position and the way that you've kind of seen the game by being a video coordinator, I'm just curious for you personally, having been someone who's seen so much film and looked at a lot of film and, like I said, become a tech wizard, I think these last few years, having to get used to all of this. How is your understanding of the game or what you've learned about the game of basketball kind of changed through this role as a video coordinator?
I mean, I think when you watch a lot of basketball, you may think, you know, just from, and I think of it from prior to when I started working in college basketball, you know, a lot of times you see things on TV and you see it, you know, whatever the game is that you're watching. But then when you get into, you know, where I'm at, the position I'm at, and like you said, I've watched so much basketball and I've kind of realized that there's no one style that will win you games, period. You know, there's a bunch of ways that you can play this game and you can execute and win basketball games. So, you know, there's never one right way to do things. And, you know, I guess what I tell a lot of people is, you know, don't ever, I think I mentioned at the beginning, you know, don't lock in yourself into one, you know, specific way to play the game. You know, always be ready to kind of grow your philosophy and take, you know, don't be afraid to steal, you know.
That's for sure.
In coaching, it's a big thing, you know, steal as much as you can, you know, steal as much as you can, especially from, you know, winning programs and winning coaching staffs. And, you know, if you think you can implement it into your program and be successful with it, I would say go for it. It's just, you know, basketball is a game of creativity, and you know, it's really important to kind of embrace that creativity, especially now. I think now is, you know, it's evolved. The game has evolved from where it was, you know, even just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, don't ever hesitate to steal things and always be, you know, just continue to watch the game and, you know, build your coaching database, and, you know, just like I said, just continue to watch the game. It's very important for everybody at every level.
Have you even found in just your experience at this job that the game is like evolved and changed? Has there even been trends or things that you've kind of noticed where maybe more teams are running or more teams are doing, even your program's doing, that even, you know, even a few years back that you didn't even see? Has the change been coming that quickly?
Yeah, I think I see, at least now, almost, you know, you could go and watch film and find that every team essentially will run something on the offensive side with ball screens. You know, like everybody did. You know, a lot of teams will, you know, some teams have an identity where, you know, they'll play 5 out and they'll just spread you out and pass, cut, move, and do all of those things. But I think coaches now are realizing, you know, ball screens are such a big part of the game, and the players that we recruit have all, you know, played under a style where they're running ball screens and playing an offense like that. I think it's, you know, when I watch film, there's teams that I didn't think would be, have the personnel to do it, but yet they still are running ball screens and running a specific type of offense like that. And, that's just the way the game has evolved, and you kind of want to make sure your players are prepared to be able to do that, obviously. But that's a big one. And the trends now are, shooting a lot of threes and a lot of layups and kind of getting rid of the mid range. But I think in the NBA more specifically, there's always that conversation of, the mid range is dead and that whole thing. But
yeah,
to be honest, it's more so every team is going to be different based on personnel. And it's really up to the coaching staff to identify that and then put their players in the best position to be successful. So if it consists of, our players need to run a lot of ball screens, or our players need to be, out in space, just moving and cutting, and that's how, we're going to score a lot of our points, then so be it. But generally, the trend that I see a lot more now is, anytime you watch film and scout, and we go into the film room to do, opponent scout film, you're going to see something with ball screens.
Yeah,
and I think your ball screen defense and how you teach it is also very important on the opposite end of the spectrum too.
So there you go. If any high school player or coaches at high school, get those players get on those ball screens there and open up some doors for you maybe.
Yeah, player development wise, that's a big thing. If you have a player who can dissect the ball screen and come off and really create an advantage, you have a player that you can work with for sure.
That's
and
awesome.
the more players that you have that can do that, the more dangerous you'll be to spread it out.
And there you go. Awesome. Alrighty, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest to wrap up. So I'll go ahead and get started here with this first one. Thinking back on, I usually talk in like the coaching context about a coaching moment, but we can kind of take this any way you want, playing film moment, anything you want in particular. But thinking back on your basketball career in general, what is a moment of yours from your career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
I would say it's not really, one specific moment. I would say it's more of a collection of, over the years. So, my first year, we were 11 and 19 here. My second year, we were 16 and 15. And then last year, with, a lot of games being canceled and postponed, we were 11 and 11. So, those first 3 years, and then even this first part of this year, they're my introduction to the college game. And, I've made a lot of mistakes adjusting to it. But the one thing that I really found the most important thing to do when you get into coaching at whatever level you're at is to just, and we spoke about it before, is just learn the people around you as best as you can. Learn about your coaches, learn about the staff that you work with, learn about your players, especially, and really develop genuine relationships as much as possible. Because I think relationships really can take your program away, just your career to higher levels alone. Because if you develop that one relationship and, they end up becoming successful, a lot of times, especially in this Division I coaching, coaches will bring the people who were with them when they were, struggling or down at the bottom. They'll bring them up with them when they start to move up or, move on to different programs. That kind of it's a cycle.
Yeah.
So I think those who connect the best and carry relationships on in their own genuine way, they're going to have a higher chance at succeeding. And I guess a quote that always resonates with me is, Jay Wright was kind of asked about how he took his program to, different heights. And I think this was after they won their second national championship, but he pretty much answered it and said, it took an unconquering belief in self and a deep understanding of people. And I think, that really is what it is. If you can understand the people around you and understand their journey, you give self and understanding on the things that we go through in our own lives. People will do whatever it takes for you, and they'll want to be around you and want you to be, with them. And that's the one thing that I've taken from my whole close to 4 years being within the college game, and even before that.
Yeah,
so that's the big thing. Sure.
Awesome. And what you just said would it almost be like a perfect little answer for this last question here, but I'm gonna ask it to you anyway, so I don't mind if you repeat yourself a little bit.
No,
To wrap up, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox, kind of your platform to get out a final message, a final idea, kind of a closing thought that you want to leave the listeners with. Again, I kind of feel bad because you had such a good one before, but I'm gonna make you have to spout out another. So I'm gonna go ahead and give the floor and turn it over to you, and you can go ahead and take it away.
So I guess I'll just, I'll take it a different avenue.
There you go.
I think skill development is very, very important at every level. And I think it's something that we as coaches, we shouldn't really take as a one-way street. A lot of times, we're coaching kids, and kids need guidance, they need a vision, and they need an avenue for creativity. So when it really comes down to it, players will win you the games. You can make all the decisions you want and, tweak things, but the players will make the plays and they will win you the games. So I would say, make developing your players in the off season and even in season, make that a high priority. But most importantly, show your players that you care. Get on the floor if you can, be involved in that process. Sit down and create a plan for your players, but be creative. Be creative in getting, making your players better and make them excited to work. I think if you can create workers and build competitors, no matter the X's and O's parts of the games and the teams and talent levels, that is important. And I think, for coaches as well, it's important to develop. So for anybody listening, that's, just starting out coaching, just be relentless when you're studying and watching different forms of the game. I challenge you to watch as much basketball as you can, as many games as you can. Form your opinions and your preferences, but always be open. And I stressed it earlier, and I can't harp on it enough, be willing to steal from other people as much as you can in coaching, because there's always more than one correct way of doing things. So if you can take a blend of them all and make it your own, you have a very good chance of being successful. So
awesome. Well said. Well, I want to thank you. And again, it's just a habit, so you're going to still be called coach for me. Coach Raniero, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about your program, kind of basketball at the D1 level, about using film as a teaching tool. Some real insightful things that even those at the younger levels can definitely take from to maximize those film sessions that they have with their players. So best of luck to you. I know that there's a lot of travel involved. Hopefully you and the whole program can stay safe and everything. I know it's still a crazy time out there on the world of everything going on. So best of luck in the remainder of your season. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Coach. Thank you for the opportunity to be on here. And, I won't definitely very appreciative for it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you who listen. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.